I was muted the whole time. So, hey guys, welcome to another edition to the show. I'm here with my co-host Caleb Jackson, and we don't have an inoculator on today. I don't know what happened to him, but it's kind of my fault because I kind of switched it out the last moment to today. So maybe he's just forgotten. I don't know. But I kind of started the whole cascade of failure here. So we're sorry about that, but we're here today anyway. And I'm, like I said, joined here with Caleb. What's going on, man?
What's going on? Can you hear me?
I can hear you good.
Good. Okay. I just got a mic, so I was hoping it could be heard. Yeah, I'm doing well. I don't. I guess Cassiano, he's also in a different time zone, so I don't know if that's part of the
Yeah.
reason. But it's fine. We can still have fun on here.
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anybody can join if they want. I'll just open this up to like an open mic, but it's kind of
Right.
early in the day, so I don't know if we'll get anybody. But
It's a
it all,
Sunday. It's fine.
yeah, yeah, and also open it up to questions and stuff like that. But what started this cascade of failure for me was that I had my daughter's sweet 16 birthday party yesterday, and I totally her sweet 16 was kind of like last minute. We planned it last minute because she was unsure what she wanted to do. So we finally got it figured out, and she was able to have fun anyway. And we had family over and did the whole family thing yesterday, and that was fun. But yeah, I'm 40 this year, and my daughter's 16, and I'm a father of a 16-year-old.
You feel old.
I do feel old, man. So,
Oh,
what Cassiano specifically wanted to bring up was uh, Creatio ex Nihilo, and the Genesis myth. And at first, here I am. I planned this like logical argument I was going to give, and I was starting to prepare for it, and then I realized, why am I going to prepare for something that's so broad, you know, and like I had to get specifics because first it was just Creatio ex Nihilo myths, right? So we're like, okay, I'm not sure what other holy book predicts Creatio ex Nihilo, right? So I was like, I'm gonna have to look into other religions. Now I've heard Hinduism has a argument for one, but their stuff is so all over the place. Their creation myths are there's multitudes of them from what I've come to find out, and there isn't just one. So it was hard to address. So I didn't really prepare an opening statement. I started to, based on the little logical argument that it was just a basic modus ponens argument that I came up with. And I was going to get into that and why I think, it's good. Creatio ex Nihilo is a good explanation for what we observe in reality. But with that said, he got back to me and said he wanted to specifically talk about the Genesis account. And I was like, okay, well, now I can just pretty much throw away everything that I just wrote up, and we'll focus on Genesis. So it was really cool because I got to go on to CSG the other night, and we talked about Creatio ex Nihilo and the different views amongst Christians. And it's interesting, Caleb. I kind of want to know where you stand on the whole, Genesis account. What is it? Is it historical narrative? Is it just mytho history, or whatever view you hold to?
yeah. As far as well, it really depends. So as far as the creation account itself, the cosmology behind it, I don't think we're reading a science book. I don't really take Hugh Ross's view that this is literally detailing stuff in creation. I will admit that I have not read much into it. I know people like Vince Stanhope and Eric Minton and even Travis have read more of the literature regarding that. But from just hearing the different options, I think it's John Walton's view of like this cosmic temple being built, which I think was derived from like Babylonian or myths about Baal building the universe. And they're saying no, Baal didn't build the universe. Yahweh built the universe, and having the imagery of that, I would probably take it that way. So no, I don't necessarily see this being a literal account. As far as like Adam and Eve, which I know is a bit different from the Creatio ex Nihilo, I still don't necessarily know what I think. Some people take a view of like complete mythos and archetypes. Some people say, well, no, there was one, but they weren't the first humans. Some people say, well, they were the first humans, but they were Australoth, how to hide or whatever you pronounce it, So there's different. I also have not read Craig's new book yet, which I need to, of the historical Adam, but I've heard very mixed reviews on that. So
Yeah, yeah, I had some criticism on Craig's view with this new book. I heard he's gotten some flack from it. I haven't read it yet either, but
mhm.
yeah, I plan to pick it up at some point once I finish this
But from
class I'm
interviews,
in.
I felt like I agreed with a lot of what he said, but I haven't read the book and I don't know all the extant literature, so I hold that very tentatively.
Yeah, and I don't think even as an old earther myself, I don't take Genesis as a science book, but maybe a history book. I think it does give history in which the ancient Near East people would understand a little bit better than we would think they did, or what we think they did. But I don't hold to Walton's view. As I kind of came out uh Friday was like, no, Walton's wrong, but I think there's some good reasons for that, and I think I think Walton takes his view too far into the ancient Near East genre. I think Genesis was unique amongst all the cultures, but I do believe in the polemic side of it. I do think that there is that idea of like, no, God, Yahweh did it, and I think that's there as well. But I can also get that with a historical narrative view, because I do
Yeah,
believe that there are snapshots of what happened in history and how God created the earth. One question that came to mind first when I started this whole thing was, what do what do the accounts of creation tell us about Creatio ex Nihilo? That was like the first thing that came to mind. I think on Walton's view, you don't need Creatio ex Nihilo. I think it's implied, but I don't think you need it like right off. So I like always ask, well, where do we get a doctrine of Creatio ex Nihilo from? Like Nehemiah 6. Do we go to Psalms 92? Do we go to Proverbs 8:22 through 31? Do
yeah,
we go outside the Bible with Second Maccabees 7:28, or the New Testament canon? Romans 4:17 or Hebrews 11:3. You know, but yeah,
yeah, and
go.
that's where no, you're good. The reason I from my lay understanding of it, think Walton's view is understandable is just because when I look at other elements of Genesis, like, Gilgamesh and Noah, I can see some of the kind of literary reworkings of certain ways of saying, no, this was actually Yahweh and doing this in the Jewish sense and not in the more pagan or Assyrian sense of that. But it's tentative, and I think all of that is relevant. But I don't really put too much stock into it. Of course, I live in Kentucky, where the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter are, so there are a lot of people who would hold to that view. But I, yeah, and in terms of old Earth creationism, I personally don't really. I mean, I understand there are people like Hugh Ross and stuff who take that, but I feel like having that and divorcing that from theistic evolution is just strange to me. Not that it can't be done, but I think, especially from a theology standpoint, when you at least look at evolution, you have this cycle of cause and effect, where when one species goes extinct, it leads to the survival of another. But I feel like with old Earth creationism, you just have a God watching animals die, then creating more ones, then watching them die. There's not this kind of causal chain that you have with evolution. So it feels like more pointless suffering to me to see God just having an old Earth with death and then creating it when there not being a connection between them. So, but those are all different issues. So that's just why, as far as origins, I don't think that view to me makes much sense. As far as ex nihilo, I do accept. I would lean towards saying God created ex nihilo, more so philosophically. Although there are also philosophical questions I have, is because we don't really have any good analogy to that. Where, when, as far as we know, cause and effect, it's from pre-existing conditions and states. So it's hard to imagine nothing, God creating from nothingness out of something that's not something that we're really familiar with. But I think most of the Eastern religions you brought up have more of like a cyclical model, where it's just eternally coming from something prior. But I would say, contingency wise, I would lean towards saying that there has to be a necessary state that creates out of it. But I don't think it makes sense to say that, like, you have this contingent material that's always been there, that's being upheld, like kind of what the Mormons believe of God reworking matter into that. But I think reading Genesis, that's a possible interpretation. I could see, because it says the earth was formless and Yahweh is the one forming it. But I don't think that's even unbiblical to say that God did not create ex nihilo. But I would be on the camp to say that he probably did, but it also depends on whether or not you think the universe began to exist and all of the cosmology behind that. So
Yeah, I hold to that. I think there's a lot of evidence that shows us that the universe began to exist, and I understand you're coming at it from more of a philosophical
mhm.
position, which is respectable. But one of the things that kind of worry me though is that, I think and here's the idea, and this is where I have a problem with the functional views. I really think the functional view alone, you can actually take out creation altogether. It's kind of like a medium that you can do that. That whole idea, you can take out Creatio ex Nihilo, you can meet the middle, and I don't think that's the case. I really think that Genesis is unique uh in its creation, right? And I truly think that you know it's inspired by God, right? So I don't want to say uh, that it's not, So one thing that you
As
did
if as
say
if
that
God can't use as
right,
if God can't use man's uh,
right.
storytelling to work it. I mean, that's
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things that I was thinking though was that one thing you said that really like struck how you said that Gilgamesh and you could see the stories reworked. But you see,
mhm.
I have looking into it more and listening to the lectures I've just recently done, and then all the readings I've done with Reasons to Believe, their work. I don't see it being a reworking. I see it more or less. Gilgamesh is a representative of humans, right? But in Genesis, we always see that God is taking real people in real time and telling their story. That we're learning about their story, real people in real time. Gilgamesh wasn't a real person in real time. He was lifted up as a representative of all mankind, and you can see that in the Numa or in the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? So yeah, that's one of the things I saw right off the bat. And then there's that whole idea that the initial conditions that we see, and this is the Ross view, right? And it's kind of like a bleeding into that. You see the initial conditions explained as Ross does, and you see that we get a perfect 10 out of 10 for initial conditions, which I think the only uh, close one that comes in behind it is the Enuma Elish with like 2 out of 10.
What are
So
you talking
it's
about as
kind of
far as
weird.
initial conditions?
Well, they get the idea of God creating out of nothing, confirmation of that through science. We see that the Big Bang, everything came into existence at the Big Bang. We can extrapolate backwards. Then you have the perspective change, right? You have from God being outside of creation, kind of looking into now he's on the earth, which is formless and void, which matches what we see in science, which says that our planet was a water planet and the oxygenation events and plate tectonics is what caused those events to create the landmass, right? And I do understand the objection of animal suffering and this and that. I think that was purpose, though. And I think that we can see the purpose in how we use fossils and stuff today, and how God basically has a purpose in each epoch of time. So I think that was pretty cool and how Ross explains that in Improbable Planet. But um,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, so I do think it. I do think Genesis gets it right when it comes to describing the days, and I think even the Hebrew wording you can make sense of it. I think Walton does a disservice when he actually kind of retranslates bara. I don't think that that's really called for. But
So
anyways,
you
I'll let
think
you
that
speak. I've been talking for like 15 minutes. So.
no, you're good. So when Genesis talks about on the fifth day you have birds and fish prior
Right.
to well, obviously fish, but do you think birds were prior to land reptiles?
No, no, I think there's a skip there. I don't think it's describing every single thing at once, right? So I think that we get this idea of soulless creatures and this and that, and I know other people make a big deal about uh uh the what is it land plants before, what is it, ocean animals or whatever. Is
Mhm.
that one of the objections? But
Yeah.
we have the isotopes now that came out and said that land, vegetation was abundant on Earth when before, I guess, these ocean dwellers popped into existence. But we see the first life, I think, with the clearing of the atmosphere.
But
So
doesn't
we
the
see where the
didn't the
osmosis
first life
comes in.
develop in but the first life developed in the water, right?
I would say yes. I'd have to look again into my notes on that one, but uh, I would have to say yeah. I would have to say that it did, but as soon as we get oxygenation, we get those animals. As soon as we get that, and that happens what on was it the first day? You know, we get the clearing of the sky to from what is it, OPEC to trans translucent, right? So that's where I would kind of say that happens. So
Do you think that the Earth was created before the sun and the moon and the stars?
no, no, of course not. I don't think Asha, the word Asha, is describing bara, and
Mhm.
that's where I
Well, yeah, that's where we
disagree
get into the
with. Yeah,
technical, like, Hebrew
yeah,
idioms. Yeah, and
right.
that's also just why I guess that's just where you and I would part ways on, is I don't really try to read it as this dispensationalist view of describing cosmology. It's the same when Muslims do that with the Quran and saying Allah stretches out the heavens and it's talking about the expansion of the universe, or a bunch of other stuff where it's like, these are stuff people would have known at the time, and these are really not ways that you're doing it. So I'm just trying to be very careful not to read in hindsight wise. And I don't think you really see any of the, at least to mine, again, I haven't looked into this as much, so I could be wrong, but as far as I know, I don't think any of the church fathers were getting accurate cosmology from were able to describe that, at least with, I'm not saying that they got geocentrism from that, but certainly I think that, from what I understand with Jewish traditions and the earliest Christian traditions prior to like the Enlightenment, I don't think you were seeing all of this scientific predictions besides the beginning of the universe, from reading scripture. But
Well,
maybe that's
I
just
think,
me.
well, I you do see other philosophers though, like Hercules and Theocles, who were actually concerned with uh, material reality and where it comes from. You also see a huge fight, not like I told everybody at CSG yesterday. I think it's actual bigger fight than Calvinism versus Arminianism. I don't think they were looking for like, okay, God did it. This is exactly how God did it. However, I think the idea of fighting the what they call eternalism, that was a huge fight. And I think that's what they were. That's where that polemic comes in. And I think that's where we get, the Creatio ex Nihilo, and that's why I think it's so prevalent in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. I think
Mhm.
that we can extrapolate a God that comes and creates from nothing, and I think it's asserted because of that fight that they had with the pagan cultures, because they're unique amongst all those cultures in saying that, God created out of nothing, and he's the first cause, and there's nothing, matter didn't exist at the same time as him. He didn't reform matter into order, and he didn't take chaos from order. He was, it was always been orderly, and we see that in reality. But that's just me.
Yeah, that makes that seem like, I don't know. It seems almost, if you're going to say that. Well, I know not everyone says this, but like it seems pantheistic to say like, if is the matter coming from God, or is it literally coming from no prior state whatsoever? Which I'm assuming ex nihilo means
Mm,
the latter, right?
yeah.
Literally just forming. I don't know what that would look like though, because I can't think of any good analogy to that we see in our world. Maybe there isn't one, right? Because that's not
Uh,
typically how we view stuff. It's just to have the idea of something just popping into existence from nothing. Granted, not without a cause, but it's just very hard to conceive of that. And I don't. That's, I guess I'm not saying it's necessarily illogical, but you do get into issues then with A and B theory of time, and does God act? Does God create time in this moment? Did God decide prior to this? Does God acting in the moment? Is God in a different sector of time where He's doing stuff prior to the creation of the universe, or is the creation of the universe His first act, and so forth? So it's just a lot of questions there that could be debated.
Yeah, but I got a sheet here about creation or the plants first. Old Earth creationists contend that God caused dry land to emerge from water-covered Earth over eons of time through plate tectonics and other geological processes. Then, once the conditions were right, God caused plants to sprout and grow and develop after their kinds. According to their view, different generations of plants appeared over time to God's timetable, each perfectly matched to the environment and the increasing sunlight as the atmosphere continued to gradually clear. So that was kind of like what I was thinking there. But
Hmm. Yeah, no, that is interesting. I wish Travis was here because he could give more of a scientifically informed view than what I would be able to say. But then I
yeah,
guess the second point of the of the empirical evidence for creatio ex nihilo, that would be relevant to the kalam. Although I know the kalam is pretty debated as far as its mostly the second premise as far as its veracity. And I do lean towards thinking that the kalam is sound because I think the evidence is I would say it's more probable than not, but I don't know if it's so certain that it can be a slam dunk argument. So I would say that I think the scientific evidence leans towards that, but it's also there's a lot of uncertainty that we don't know, and that's what makes it very complicated.
yeah, I don't know, man. You're really hanging your hat on that billionth of a second, right? you
Mhm.
know, you're really like hanging your hat there. I think it's like you said, it's more probable than not. I don't think I've heard any cosmologists say that or deny the probability of it.
But it
I
depends
don't
on
think I've
how
heard
much more.
any.
Is it like 55 to 45? Is it 60-40? That's the question. How much more? Right? I don't think it's like 99 to 1.
It's
That's the
it's 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 in the 90s from what I've been told by Hugh Ross and other people that it's that certain. At
Yeah,
least
I'm not sure as far as consensus among among physicists. I don't know if that would be. I don't know the exact
yeah.
head count
Well,
as far
they
as that.
they jump into what they just jump into speculation, right? So they jump into speculative models that could explain it. But from what I've seen, all of them have pretty much failed.
Mhm.
I haven't seen them be able to um, calculate things and so forth to where they're not being opposed at every corner saying, okay, the calculations are still producing a singularity and we just, we can't explain
Well,
it.
it's true that yeah, I would agree. I don't think there's any model to my knowledge that is successful. There are models that predict it based on the math, but when you get to actually carrying it out physically, they have issues and don't really work. But I guess the difference is between general relativity and quantum mechanics, because general relativity would predict the singularity, but quantum mechanics, once you get to that billionth of a second, comes in, and because we don't have a quantum theory of gravity, it's very difficult. If we're able to develop one, that could be a game changer. We just don't know, but it's also fairly early because quantum mechanics has only been developed for what the past
Yeah.
100 years, and
It's really not
Einstein really
developed. They're
no, it
still
isn't.
working on
It's a
stuff.
very recent field in comparison to some other fields. So I'm not saying that it isn't
Yeah.
that way. I just
Mhm.
saying I just don't know. And I sympathize with the more the philosophical arguments, but that gets into complicated
Right.
mathematics that I'm not qualified in, and it also gets into I think even if there was a finite one, you could argue that there was some material that was indeterministic that caused it. But that this isn't necessarily about the Kalam. So I'm just saying that I
Yeah.
just don't use it because I think it's good as a piece of evidence, but I don't think it's so strong to make it like astronomically more probable. I just think the contingency argument's better because even if it were the case that the universe was eternal, you could still have God as an explanation. But yeah, I don't know. For Creatio ex nihilo, I'd say it seems more likely than not. But again, I have issues on both sides because it's very hard for me to imagine God creating ex nihilo, but it's also hard to give evidence for I think an eternal universe would also have issues. So on both of those
Oh
counts.
yeah, I think so. I think so. I think it'd be a big issue, but yeah, I hear you. but as far as Genesis 1, I really look at it as there's like four links, right? I mean, we see that in the beginning, God, and I think it tells us that God did exist before matter. I think it also tells us that Earth was a wasteland, and that implies that matter did not coexist with God. I think the fact that he created that God brought something new that did not exist previously is important. Uh, then God spoke, obviously, and matter didn't come from the body of God, like pantheism says. But over that, I did want to jump into that's where I think this whole notion of bara, I think, is unjustified on Walton's view because we see no cognates in the surrounding culture. I mean, cognates only appear in like what late Syro-Arabic and Old South Arabic, and that's with the sense of buildings. So I think it was truly unique to the culture. So I think that's pretty. I think that was pretty interesting. There's this
Hmm.
great. I got a lot of this from John Oswalt, who's came out with a lecture on Creatio ex Nihilo. It was really good. I sent the link to Travis to give me his thoughts. I'm still waiting for him to let me know what his thoughts were on it. But it's really interesting. But yeah, I think when you look at Genesis 1 and you look at the way it's constructed, I do think you can really develop a good doctrine of Creatio ex Nihilo that ends up fitting throughout the rest of Scripture. Because I think these guys, like when it comes to creation and them fighting against that eternalism, I think that was a big deal because you see them fighting it in other areas of Scripture, like Proverbs and Psalms and Nehemiah, and then in Second Maccabees. You see, uh, and it was. Let me see if I have the Second Maccabees 7:28, which is an apocryphal account. It's
Hmm.
basically a mother trying to uh, dissuade her son from joining Antiochus,
Hmm.
you know, and she asserts like right out, this is the God that made something from us. Don't leave and join him because you serve the sovereign God that creates something from nothing, basically. But
Yeah, and I guess that
yeah, it's
also raises
interesting.
questions as far as like, was heaven and the angels, are they also created ex nihilo, or are they? Do we take more of an eternalist model with them because they're not material in the same sense? Are we saying that all contingent things on God are ex nihilo, or only physical matter? That's a
No, I think when you're looking how God creates, I think He did create the angels. I don't think they're eternal in themselves.
Did he create them before the creation of the world, or simultaneous with it, or after?
All of reality, I would say it's right in there in the beginning, God. So I think that could be all of reality. That could be all of space time reality. All of whatever went on in the heavens. We don't know for sure when it comes to that. I don't think. I mean, we might be able to glean some ideas or Jewish ideas from that, but I don't think we'd have a cogent theory for that.
So when
I'm
God
just not
goes
sure.
from Yeah. So when God goes from prior to ex nihilo, where he's just sitting there doing it, does he change as far as acting on his? Did God always want to create the universe and then he just acts upon it in a moment of time, or does God, at the same moment of wanting to create the universe, create the universe? But does God go from not wanting to create the universe to create? Did God have the property of being creator prior to creating the universe, or not? That's where
Yeah,
it's kind of
that's
getting.
a deep yeah, it's a deep question, man. And that's
Yeah.
that's why I really wanted to talk about it. Of course, my original discussion was just talking about Genesis and stuff like that, but
Right.
it's
Well,
definitely an
it's
interesting
relevant as far
issue.
as origins and creating the universe. Yeah.
Yeah, but as far as I'm concerned, I think God is the creator and sustainer of everything. So I would say yes, He created them, speaking them into existence, just as He did our existence. So, and I think it happened simultaneously at once. So I think everything just came to be. And however long that is, I don't know if Genesis really addresses that. I
Hmm.
think they could be
Yeah.
epochs of time.
I
And
would
I think
agree.
that's
Yeah, I would agree
implied.
that it was epochs of time.
Yeah, and I think it's implied because you have that notion of a day starting and a day ending. That doesn't make sense on a young Earth view. It really doesn't. But it makes sense when you see that the seventh day has no end. It's not. We're still in that rest. God hasn't created, and I think that's wild that we see speciation before humanity, and that we don't really notice it afterwards, which is something Ross always harps on, So I think it's interesting. It's definitely brings more to mind that what were the ancients thinking about when they create when Genesis was put on paper. What did they experience? And I think they experienced revelation from God. I think that I just the beauty of it when it all fits, with those initial conditions and what we see in our observable reality. I think this is where Travis would agree with me on is where it gives you those snapshots, So again, he also holds to that cosmic, and I don't know where we'd part on that. So it'd be interesting to have him here.
Yeah, it's just that's I guess my view of inspiration is just different as well. But I like to think that it's human. It's the coactualization of man and God working together, because this idea of I'm not saying that you're saying this, but like people have this idea of almost a Quranic view of inspiration where God is verbatimly telling people to write this down. And I
Yeah.
think that that kind of inspiration demeans humanity, because I think part of our journey here is to learn and to discover the world and to be built up. It's the same reason why when we have all these disagreements in Christianity, God could very easily just come down and say, hey, you all Baptists, you're the ones who are right, or you Catholics are the ones who are right. But I think the reason he doesn't do that is because there's benefit in us talking and discussing these things, right? And debating them. And so I think doing that with creation as well, to figure it out for ourselves and not just tell us, I think there's a lot of beauty to that. So, and Cassiano's also here.
Yes,
Which is great.
Cassiano decided to come and see us. What's up, buddy?
Oh, hey, sorry about being late-ish. I
It's
had
all
a
right, man.
quick errand to do.
Oh,
So,
it's
hey,
cool. We've
yeah,
been all over the place
my
talking about Creatio ex Nihilo and the surrounding cultures and so forth, man. We just been kind of chatting about it. So I know we could just skip the formalities and you can just start laying out your case if you'd like, and just tell us what you think and what you've been thinking about, when it comes to it.
okay, cool.
So whenever you get
Just, let me
settled,
s-
man,
just give me.
you don't have to like just rush into it. We're kind of doing an
Okay,
informal
okay.
thing today.
All right. Just give me 5 minutes. Just give me
We'll
5 minutes.
give you 5 minutes, my friend. But yeah, Caleb, what was your last comment there? You're muted, my friend. Those
Is
new
that better?
mics get you all the time.
Is that better?
Yeah, man, you're good. I hear you.
It was talking about the doctrine of inspiration with creation, and just saying that I don't
Yeah.
think it's beneficial for God to just tell us how he created the universe. I think just going out and discovering that helps us. It's for the same reason God doesn't just tell us what denomination's correct and what theology we should have. We have to sit
Oh,
here and debate
absolutely.
about it. So I think that
Yeah.
doing that with the doctrine of creation is also nice.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the discovery of it is what keeps that drive alive. I think humanity's best at its when it's discovering things. I mean, look at the space race. I mean, shooting rockets to the moon with people in them. It's pretty wild. But but some people would disagree and tell me that the moon landing was fake too. Did you actually see was it Buzz Aldrin like clock that guy that was telling him that he didn't land on the moon?
Did he? No, I
Yeah,
saw
man.
I saw Jeff Bezos go in space, but I didn't see that. Yeah.
Interesting though. But yeah, I do think I don't think God sat people down and chronicled things like you're saying. I do think there might be a special occasion on Sinai where he did that with Moses. So I do think that could have that's very possibly could have been the case there, which is where we would end up getting Genesis from anyway, if that was true.
Yeah, because I don't think you could reasonably argue that Genesis is a historical account in the same way the Gospels are, because there wasn't someone here writing this down as Noah or Adam, because this covers thousands of years. And, no one was sitting here writing
Oh
it down, watching
yeah,
this as an eyewitness besides God. So,
yeah, and I think that would be incumbent upon a theistic worldview to say that God may have did give Moses this history, and that's where I think the history would make sense if God gave it to him. And I think it would have to be right. I think it would have to confirm what we discover, like as even now, And like you said, I think the beauty of discussing these type of things is that we can discuss them, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
There it is.
yep. There he's getting ready. He's a little sideways.
Yeah, I'm trying to put my
Adjust.
camera.
There you go, just like that.
Yeah,
See, I get these
my
little.
camera stand.
I get
I
this
want to
little
try
guy.
to put
I get this little guy from Five Below, a little store
Oh.
that only costs like $5, and put your phone on there, and it's like perfect little
That is
stand.
cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
So how you been, man? What's been going on with you? You had COVID, and we were going to talk
Oh
earlier, but you
yeah,
got COVID and got sick, and then I
got.
had to go to
Oh,
Puerto Rico. Oh, he froze up on me.
Oh no.
Anyways, yeah. So yeah, go ahead. You were going to say something before he jumped on.
I don't think I was actually. I think I was just nodding and agreeing with
Yeah.
stuff that you said. So
Yeah.
no. Oh, I
Yeah,
guess I was going to ask of if this is relevant to ex nihilo. Of like, are you factoring in like abstract objects into that as well, or can someone have an eternalist view of those?
I don't think so. I think unless you're considering God some abstract. I mean,
Well, but
no,
God
I
can
think he's an
interact with the
agent.
physical world. Yeah. But like,
Yeah, and I think that
did the number
all of
3 exist alongside God, or did logical truths exist alongside God for past
man,
eternity?
you're talking about that Platonism and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
you're
That
right.
oh man, I have not truly made a decision on it. I've heard the views, I've heard both views, but I haven't decided on one yet.
Because I know Peter Brandwagon would take that view, and Craig would say, "Well, no, these don't actually exist; they just exist in the mind of God." And that's why, and that to me makes
And
more
it could.
sense because it's simpler. Because I think it's
Mhm.
easier to say they just exist in the mind of God and have one than saying there's an infinite number of these necessary beings that exist.
Right. And
And
that's very
just more
possible.
complicated.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, and I like taking the easier view, but it's like it does make you think. These are deep metaphysical questions. You gotta think about these avenues, all this stuff. But yeah, I've heard both views, and I just really haven't landed on one totally yet because I feel like I'd have to give it like at least a year of study, to really be able to come up with a solid view. And if you don't know that about me by now, man, you're never gonna get it because
You really should be
look
writing
into a
books
lot of these
about it.
things. I really look into a lot of these things, but I don't. I won't settle unless I give it like a very long amount of time. Like I'm dead set on the Gospels being historically reliable. I don't think my position could budge unless something astronomical happens. I know enough about it that I think the history's solid. I think it's a solid argument. I think they're reliable. The resurrection the same. And morality, I'm pretty good on morality. But yeah, there's some of these like
That's
real
interesting.
deep philosophical issues that I've studied a little bit on, but not long enough to be able to say I'm sure I'm solid in it and let's duke it out.
That actually brings up an interesting question. This isn't really getting off topic, but since you're bringing that up, I was going to ask if you've seen Cameron Bertuzzi's interviews with people, with Craig and Swinburne. He asked them, what view that you've defended are you most confident about, and which view are you least? And you kind of answered that with what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting too, as far as how that pertains. Like for me, I would say most confident. I would probably say my belief in libertarian free will, belief in God as the source of morality, and probably belief that miracles happen. Those would probably be like some of my most confident ones. Least confident, maybe my like animal theodicy, animal suffering, like how my reasons for that. Maybe my universalism would be more lower tier depending on the mood I'm in that day. So it really just depends.
The mood.
Depending on what mood I'm in. So those would probably be the way I see that. So yeah, so that's kind of how you would answer that as well as what
Yeah,
you've already
absolutely.
said?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It comes to a point like if I'm going to speak on it, I like hesitate to speak on certain things because I don't want to misspeak. You know what I mean? I don't want to like say something that I don't really hold to, or say something out of step, and then look stupid.
Right. But yeah,
So,
like stuff
yeah,
like gospel reliability is so broad that I think that's very hard to take like a, because like that's, what do you mean by reliable? What is that, like that's just such a difficult,
Well,
and there's
yeah, if
so
we're gonna
much
play
data
with
there that, yeah.
if we're gonna play with the semantics of it, yeah, you have to kind of like narrow it down. You know, I
Yeah,
think that when I
do you
say
think
reliable,
Josephus is reliable? Do you think Tacitus is reliable? It just depends on, like,
absolutely,
are
I
we saying
do.
they're that kind of, okay? So is it that level of reliability where it's like they get 95 out of 100 things right? Like, is that like, how are we defining? Yeah, that's
Well,
where
I
it's
mean, it
complicated.
depends on what you're talking about, like the areas of study that you're talking about. Did Tacitus get it right when he talked about Jesus? I think that's universally accepted by
Mhm.
scholars, and I think that is universally the case, as far as
Right.
I can read and what I can tell.
Well, it's
So,
also questions of which
and when
parts too, because certain parts will be like, parts about Jesus' ministry that were seen by the disciples as eyewitnesses would be something that'd be easy to see. But when you have like the infancy narratives of the wise men and stuff where the disciples were clearly not there, and it's not clear who the source is for this, that's a lot harder to confirm and stuff
Well,
like
I
that. So
mean,
it just
well, it
depends on the
depends. I mean,
section.
yeah, I hear you, and I try to use common sense. If the rest of the story is a lot of it, or if the rest of the story is reliable, I think we have good reason to believe that the infancy narratives and stuff are reliable as well. I think if these guys are doing their due diligence in the rest of their gospel, I think they're going to be doing due diligence to the beginning of their gospel.
Well,
So
it just
depending on
depends on the
Matthew or
sources.
on
Yeah.
Luke.
Yeah, it depends on the sources they're using too. I mean, if it's, we have four biography, no, two, or I think maybe two, I forget how many biographies of Alexander the Great, which are generally pretty reliable. And even in those,
Mhm.
Alexander is born of his Zeus turns into a snake and sleeps with his mother, and that's how Alexander was conceived. And this is
Yeah.
how his biography starts off. And so
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would say, well, if the rest of it's reliable, that gives us confidence that this really happened. But
Yeah, well, that's true.
that's why I
That's
say it's a
true. You have
complicated
to
question.
consider it. Yeah, you have to consider those things, but you also got to consider the genre in which they were writing too. Those biographies of Alexander, was that a common thing for them to assert that he had to be part of a god and so forth? That's
Yeah, it
not
was.
common, and that's not common for Jewish writers. So you
Not
have
for
to
Jewish
consider those
writers,
things
right?
as well. Yeah, you have to consider those things as well, and that's where I would say these guys are doing their due diligence. They're not doing something that's out of the ordinary, of what they're writing, and stuff like that. So I would take that into consideration as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, you have to, yeah, all those avenues have to be discussed, and all those avenues have to be explored when you're coming up with a cogent theory, and you can't miss those, you can't miss them, because then you haven't really done your due diligence. So
Right. Yeah, and that's why I just try to say, like, let's look on a case by case basis. I don't want to be too overly general about any particular
yeah,
thing. So that's just where, like, let's look at the sources. Let's look at there's 100,000 factors we have to look at. And it's funny that in my discussion with Jonathan Pierce, I was trying to defend the Gospels, because usually I'm the one of my conservative friends who's like putting the least amount of emphasis on them. But it's kind of weird when I'm talking to Christians how I'm more skeptical on that. But when I'm talking to atheists, I want to be like, oh no, we can trust certain details. So it, it just depends on the context that's in. But yeah, I think as it goes to stuff like Genesis and stuff, I can understand why there's a plethora of views, including doctrines
yeah,
of creation ex nihilo. I don't know if he's coming back, by the way, but we'll
yeah,
figure it out.
yeah. Yep. I don't know, man.
We will, but it's okay. It's
Yeah, it's fine. It's what it is. He is from a whole nother country, so it
yeah.
might be harder for him to come on. And I'll give him I'll open up the floor to him when he gets back and see what he has to say. But also, I'll even arrange another date with him if he has to.
Nice.
Just
I'm
to
also
talk about it.
excited for our show on Wednesday for or no,
Yeah,
sorry, Thursday.
Thursday.
Thursday. That's what I meant.
Dude, I was
Thursday.
about to say I got off for that day, so
Yeah, it's the 14th, which is
yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
So you
which
got
is
your
for our
questions ready for him?
exorcism. I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Or you can make some too. I'll do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But
I was gonna make some like preliminary ones, and then kind of maybe do some on the fly as well. But I don't
so
know.
our audience knows, we're having an interview with an exorcist named Plato Angelicus, who's a bishop, on Thursday the 14th, which you'll be seeing
Yeah.
advertisements of hopefully soon.
Yeah.
social media. So
Yep. And we're going to go live with it. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And it's on a Thursday. I want to see how many more people show up on a Thursday than they do a Saturday. That would be interesting to see.
Thursday night, yeah,
Yeah.
it would.
But I do want to get the interview out there a little bit more in some other social media areas. So I think it would be neat. Maybe you can share it on Cameron's site.
Yeah, because
If he
Cameron's
lets
highest
you.
rated video was his interview with a different exorcist. But in the book I'm working on, I have a whole chapter on exorcism and demonic possession, which is interesting. I also like change, because if you had asked me like 2 or 3 years ago, I would have disbelieved that and thought it doesn't happen today. But I've changed my mind on it after writing about it and seeing some stuff like that. But I'm still cautious, and I mean that's how the church is too.
Yeah. And you should be.
Yeah, without getting too much into details, I mean, even the exorcist Cameron had on said maybe 1 out of every 5,000 reported ones is legitimate, but that's a very, it's far less than 1%. So they're not gun ho to just say every case of weird behavior is demonic possession. Usually it's like you have to see a psychiatrist, you have to see a doctor, make sure everything else is taken care of before we even consider that as being a possibility. So you don't want to straw man and just act as if. It's also, by the way, how it was in the Middle Ages too. I thought that was interesting, because when you look at the literature on that, the stereotype is that the Middle Ages people were superstitious and they just thought everything was demonic and people were witches and stuff. But they actually had a good understanding of science. They actually were very skeptical of miracle claims and claims of supernatural, and they tried to debunk as many of them as they could before they would say they were miracles. So the idea that everyone it's like in the Salem witch trials would just like, they didn't even think of natural explanations, is just a caricature of what actually went around back then.
No, I believe you. From what I've gathered, that was the case as well. I think, and I would totally agree with you. It's not a widespread thing. It's not something that happens all the time, like our charismatic brother would tell us. I mean, they'll tell you sometimes there's a spirit for every issue you got. So, I
have a couple charismatic friends I need to get on the show, by the way. You need to remind me to have them on sometime. Yeah.
I have no problem with charismatic. It's just when it pushes the envelope, where you get into the word of faith and then you get into prosperity and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's where it
just totally abuses the practice of Christianity to me.
I actually just made a post about that in a couple of Facebook groups, and that's what I was thinking too, because I had this very weird because it's weird that charismatics kind of have mixed feelings about me, because like on the one hand I'm like, I want to help evidentially prove some of their cases, but I also am very critical, and a lot of them I just think are BS, and they're like, oh, you have to have faith and you're not trying hard enough to just believe people. But it's weird to me that I have people where the theology of the person I don't agree with, and I think that if I can give people's names like Benny Hinn, Oral Roberts, Catherine Coleman, stuff like that, where I don't like their theology, but they actually, some of them do have medically documented cases of healing. And I just sit back, I don't really know what to do with that, because on the one hand, God can show mercy and heal people regardless, but it's also like, is he affirming what these people are teaching, or does God know that if he heals this person, they're going to continue to give money to this person's ministry? It's just complicated for me, and so I don't really know what to do with some of those. But I also don't want to just dismiss all of it because I'm biased. So.
Well, of course, but you also got to look at it like, okay, God knows the end from the beginning, at least in my view. And if he does know the end from the beginning, we might not be able to see it at that present time, but there might be a greater purpose for him to heal that person later down the road, and that might lead into something else, so we don't know fully. And there's some things we're not going to know. And I think you can make a good case for that with that argument. If you fleshed it out more. You get kind of like that Molinist defeater type of deal.
You could, but I'm hesitant for that, because people can do that with the resurrection, to say, because usually the inference is, Jesus rose from the dead, who cares? Well, Jesus claimed to be God, and so God is vindicating Jesus of these otherwise blasphemous claims. But I feel like someone could also say, well, that's not the reason God raised Jesus, just maybe out of mercy for other reasons, but we don't really know, and we can just say, somewhere down the ride, maybe God has a good reason for doing this. Or maybe Satan did it to deceive us, and God has good reasons for allowing it to happen. So so appealing to mystery is always a dangerous road for me, because I think you can do that for anything that doesn't agree with your view of saying, we just don't know God's reasons.
No, well, here's the thing is that, I think it would be a stretch to do that with the resurrection. I don't think you can make a solidly coherent argument from that position. I do think that you can make an argument about being finite and not being able to see the future. I do think you can do that, but to claim it for the resurrection, no, I think we've got the accounts that kind of nullify that. We have Jesus coming back saying, this is what happened, this is what I have to do. You're going to get the Holy Spirit, and then the Holy Spirit comes and you get 3,000 people added to the church that day. So there's a lot of, I don't think Christianity would have got off the ground. It wasn't for all that stuff too. So, but I do think there's in other words, I think you'd have to supplement it with more argumentation. Okay, so I wouldn't use like that whole Molinist defeater idea on a whim, but I would use it if there's good reason for it and I can back it up. It's just like a logical premise, man. I mean, you got to be able to back up what your premise is, and if you're going to make that premise, then you need to back it up. And I think if you have a good argumentation for it, yeah, I mean, because that's all we're doing is we're just big windbags, making ideas about reality.
So to get clarification, you're saying that if someone was healed by someone in the Word of Faith movement, like it was divinely healed by them, that God may have done out of mercy, but God is not affirming the teachings of the person who healed them?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, and I think you can make a case for that. I don't know. I haven't fleshed it out fully yet myself, because miracles isn't my strongest suit. It's one of those areas where I listen to people like you and other people that make
Craig
good
Keener,
arguments for them. Yeah, Keener and even what is it? What's the other one that I did? When we discussed miracles, like I have like that baseline view for miracles.
Paulman and Jordan, I think, discussed them.
Well, no, me, Paulman, and Jordan, and
that's right.
Yeah, it was all of us. But yeah, but that was more on like what is a miracle type thing, and
right.
When you're looking when you're looking into stuff like that, that's just, it's a lot different. Let me check something here. All right.
Yeah, you're good.
Go ahead, man. Cassiano was talking about coming back in, and I haven't seen him yet. He said 2 minutes. He's having some issues, I guess. But
I guess you can just have if he does come in, you can just have a short conversation on the topic.
Yeah.
Because I know we're almost at an hour now, but
go a
little bit longer.
Fun,
It's been fun. I wish we did more open mic nights and stuff, just where it's.
We can. I mean,
open conversation. I mean,
I
would go to Theo Geeks, but I usually work when that's on. So.
Well, days are not. I like to get to schedule our discussions on days where I think we could get a better audience too. So if we have to change things up, I try to make it palatable for the guest and palatable for our audience. So like having a conversation at this time is going to be less people because it's a Sunday, but I think that maybe a Thursday could work better than a Saturday evening,
right?
Because people are out having fun on Saturday evenings usually,
Yeah,
I mean, lives. Who wants to sit and watch YouTube on a Saturday night?
Oh, so yeah, I've never done that
kind
before.
Of been my thinking, right? Yeah, right. Well, there's some of us, right? But yeah, but should we do weekdays in the evenings? Would that be more palatable for our audience and for our guests? And that's the fine line I tread.
Yeah, it could be. We could just see how it goes.
I'm not opposed to making more than one episode a week. You can make 2 episodes. We could do an open mic night once a week if you wanted to.
Yeah, because
or once every other week.
Yeah.
No, you don't. And that's the beauty of it. That's why I put it in there, to kind of give us a break as well and just discuss, and have fun,
Yeah, absolutely.
But look, this is y'all show too, so you guys can do it too. I mean, you don't have to have me there, and you guys can schedule stuff too. You don't have to have me scheduling it all. But I know you guys are debating more now too, so that's why I've been trying to plan out
2 more debates scheduled too. So just doing this and work and prepping debates and writing a book is just a lot to get on your plate. Yeah,
I just came off probably the worst month of my life, so.
Yeah, no, I'm
so
sorry
it's
about
been
all
hard
that.
for me to do all that stuff too, and then plan the show, do school. I'm way behind in school. Today and tomorrow, I'm catching up.
I'm sure.
So
what are you learning right now in school?
I'm doing systematic logic still.
Okay. Okay.
My other classes just started, so I'll be catching up with those too. But those are easier classes for me. So I'm doing major world religions and Pauline literature too. So I'll be working on those. Get my books
Getting to
in.
learn the new perspective on Paul. I don't know if you learned that yet or have an opinion
Oh
on it.
man, I don't really have an opinion like right off the top of my head, but I have heard it. I I don't think I hold to. I think I stick to more of a traditional view, but if I can remember correctly, it was
Yeah,
I got the biography and everything on it. So the
yeah, it's
N.T.
hard for
Wright
me
one.
to read it out of how I've been raised because I was raised more in the reformed of like a sola scriptura, faith alone way. And so
Yeah,
when I read books like Romans, that's just how it naturally comes off to me. That seems
yeah,
to me like the natural reading. But I know that people will say that that's just because we're reading it through the lens of Luther, and that the earliest people
yeah,
didn't read it that way, and that might be true. I haven't looked enough into it to have a justifiable opinion on it, but I also
yeah,
don't. I also have respect for people like Wright and Dunn and E.P. Sanders who take that view. So I don't really have an opinion
yeah,
on it, but
yeah, yeah. I hear you. I like you said that it's not one of the ones that I would make a finality statement. I do like some things from it, and I do like some ideas that they have. If from what I can remember, I do like some of the ideas they have, but I also still like some of the traditional stuff that I've always considered, as being important. So yeah, that's where I kind of stand. I kind of like both, and I remember like looking at it and saying, well, this does make sense, but this doesn't. I don't see it this way. And it was like I think I did that class was like a year ago.
hmm,
So going back to Pauline literature too is going to be pretty interesting. So, but
that would be
I
pretty
did,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it was funny because I missed the first round of Pauline literature classes, so I did the first one, and then I was like, oh, I'll wait another year to do this one, or I'll wait a couple months to do this one, and the class didn't come back up until a year later, so that's where I'm at now.
What's your favorite Pauline epistle?
I would have to say First Corinthians.
Okay.
I mean, I love that. And I love Colossians, and I love Philippians a lot too. But I do enjoy seeing a lot of those older creeds that are in there. You got two
Yeah,
in
Philippians has a
First
couple creeds.
Corinthians. Yep, and I think there's a couple in First Corinthians as well, and then Colossians has the one in the beginning, I think. But seeing those early creeds really get my historical excitement. It triggers that part of me that loves history, and it's just like, wow, this is like super early. This is really cool stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, I would probably have to say First Corinthians because it addresses a lot of stuff, and then you got that the famous Corinthians 15, First Corinthians 15, where
Yeah.
we see what is of first importance, and I think that's really cool. But I also like Second Corinthians. I love the whole idea. You have the mind of Christ. I think that's in chapter 2. And I think that's really interesting. And the ideas behind that are really cool. How we have the mind of Christ and this and that. But it's really
Yeah,
neat.
I was gonna say Second Corinthians or Romans are probably my favorites, but everybody likes Romans because Romans is probably Paul's magnum opus as far as like talking about the law, and I think it's the one I have to sit down. I have to take breaks from reading because I have to think about it so much because it's so every single verse has so much in it that you have to sit there and think about it. You can't just really
It is
read it through.
right.
It's like
Yeah, I believe that. Oh, device not connected. We got somebody trying to come in.
Oh, is he trying to come in?
Yeah. There we go. We can add. There he is. All
Yes,
right,
of course.
man.
Ish, sorry for the delay. Sorry for the delay. Ish.
It's all good, man. We just been here talking about all sorts of stuff.
Okay,
So,
okay. Okay. How are you though? How's your daughter, sweet 16?
oh yeah, it was great. She got everything she wanted. We started Friday night, and then I forgot that we had the family coming over on Saturday, so that was my fault.
Oh,
But
no,
yeah, it
it's
went
okay.
well. It went well. She was happy, so I was glad for that. So, so what about you, man? You had COVID. You know, it's been rough for you there for a while.
Oh yeah, ish. I now understood the reason why people are Christians. You need something to hold on to in such moments when you feel like the life or death scenarios.
Uh,
Yeah, it was an experience. I had it
yeah.
for like 3 weeks. It was bad, but
Oof. Oof.
ish. At least I'm still alive because ish. That was the
Yeah.
it was.
Well, you know, God has a plan and purpose. So yeah,
Okay.
so you wanted to talk about uh Genesis
Ex nihilo
particularly
myth.
and ex
Yes,
nihilo.
yes.
Yeah.
Ex
So
nihilo
I'll
myths.
let you kind of explain kind of like where you wanted to go with it. I mean, we're just kind of having an open mic now since we're kind of uh been back and forth and time's an issue, but sure, I would love to hear what you had to say.
Okay, sure, 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 sure. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
Oh, Caleb, how are you? Forgot to greet you.
You're good. I'm good. I'm doing well. Sorry, I was getting up to grab something.
Okay.
It's just yeah, it's been a long morning so far, but it's been good. I still have other stuff to finish tonight, so I've just been pretty busy with work and writing and prepping for stuff. So it's a lot.
Okay. Let me. We can start. So, as we all know, uh, ex nihilo means creation out of nothing.
Hmm.
So, let's go here. We can just. I can read briefly on the ex nihilo myth thing, and then also a bit on Genesis. Then I'll tell you where I want to go on this discussion.
Sure.
All right. So, okay. So, ex nihilo, the phrase, it's a Latin phrase, out of nothing. It refers to the belief that matter is not eternal, but had to be created by some divine creative act, frequently defined as God. So basically, it's the theistic answer to the question of how the universe comes to exist. So when we go to, like, for example, um, Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So basically, it's telling us that everything owes its existence to God. God preceded the universe. God transcends the dimensions of space and time. And basically, it also implies that God created everything out of nothing. Okay. I just want to talk about, I just want to give an example of some other Xenilo myths. We can look at the Kuba people who believe in Mbombo. These are the people from Central Africa. Okay. So let me just give a summary of their creation myth. Okay. They surmise that before the universe, only water and darkness was there. It was tenanted by the giant pallid god Mbombo. Okay. It basically says Mbombo vomited out the sun, the stars, and the moon into their existence. So these are people from Central Africa. With another people, the Kono people from Sierra Leone. They also have another ex Nilo myth for Alatangana, okay, who turned solid mud, uh, and then this was how the earth was formed. It's a long creation myth, so I just wanted to just summarize it. Out of mud, he created the earth. We also
Okay.
got the Egyptian, yes.
All
So
right.
where I'm going with this basically is that let's hold on. Okay, the problem that I'm having with all of these ex nihilo myths worldwide is that all their gods who they talk about, okay, their existence or their presence cannot be proved. Okay. If we go to Genesis 1, verse 1, it's unverifiable, it's unprovable, and it also lacks peer-reviewed evidence. Then, if we look specifically at the author of Genesis, okay, where was he getting this information from? And how are we sure he's not committing the God of gaps fallacy? All right. Then obviously we've got the argument of causation, which says everything has to be created. But the problem is the argument on causation doesn't specify the Christian God as the uncaused creator, okay, and it doesn't prove that the Christian God is beyond space and time, right? And then no Christian can prove their myth is more valid than other creation myths worldwide. Basically, like if you look at the other examples I gave from Bombo, Star, and all this, if you had to bring Genesis, um, how is Genesis more valid than these other creation myths? That's basically where I'm heading
All right, that's good. Good objections there. So the first one was there's no proof of any of these of any God existing, right? So let's go through your objections one by one.
to. Yes,
Right.
yes, yes.
So the first
Like
one is
we'll talk
say
about.
the first one again.
Okay, go on.
The first objection.
Okay.
Go for the first objection. Tell us the first objection, and then we'll do it like a list. And we'll do it as fast as we can, and because we're already
Okay.
buttoned up all over an hour
All
or
right.
so.
All right. So basically, it's about the Christian God's existence. It cannot be proved. The existence of your God.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so I got that first one. And I also got the one about the creation myths, which how do you express the ones that are more valid and so forth. I would just simply come back with the idea of what does reality say? I mean, what do we see in science? What do we see as far as what the ancients told us? What do we see philosophically? I would also look into, I have no proof that God exists, but I can make an inference to the best explanation given the data I have, right? So, I mean, you can't, well, like they say, you can't scientifically like recreate the Big Bang in an experimental experiment, but we can, look back and see how the Big Bang comes into existence, and we can see the the background. We see that what's left over from the Big Bang, right? We see the cosmic microwave background noise. We see inflation. We could see the red shift in stars and stuff like that, and that suggests the beginning, right? So if there's a beginning, that leads us to, okay, what began everything, right? So we can start now saying, okay, what is the God hypothesis say? Let's propose a God hypothesis. What would give it the explanatory power it needs to make it a rational conclusion? Now, we're not even at the Christian God yet, obviously, right? We'd just be at deism, basically. So I think that in examining that, we'd have to see, okay, what would be a first cause? What would that first cause look like, right? So I would say that, the fact that we have this fine tuning, it looks like the galaxy's fine tuned for life, is one evidence, a piece of evidence that can fit into the puzzle. I also look at the actual beginning and the first mover idea to be a very rational piece of evidence that could flow into that category. Then I see the fate wrong and so forth. I give you the basic classical theist arguments, and I won't go too much into detail on that, but I do see that there's good explanatory power. The argument from contingency, the fact that we're contingent, and it seems like something that has to be necessary for existence. I think that's easier on theism than naturalism, because you'd have to basically put brute facts in, more brute facts to make your case. And I think that a theory with less brute facts is probably the better one to go with. I think that's right. Caleb, what do you think?
Well, I know this is not my debate, so I was just kind of trying to stay out of it and watch y'all moderate it.
Yeah, well, that's fine if you want to. That's fine.
No, I pretty much agree
yeah.
with everything you said, David. I
Okay.
really don't have anything to
All
add.
right.
But if you want to move on to Castiano's further points.
I do. So the one about the other creation myths, what you described with those, and I know you only were able to sum them up, but I don't see those as Creatio ex Nihilo. There's always water. There is always something else. There's always mud. You know, from what I see in these creation myths, and I've studied some. I haven't studied the one that the Central African one that you claimed. But they're very similar in respect to a lot of the ancient Near Eastern, uh, what is it? The ancient Near Eastern cultures, creation myths, right? But I don't. I see them always as like the repurposing matter. Matter has always existed. It's not like these gods pre-existed matter, right? Well, this is where I think Genesis 1 is unique, right? Genesis 1:1 in the beginning, I think it asserts. I think Genesis 1:1 asserts that God pre-existed matter. He pre-existed those. So I think it's unique in that aspect. And I think that's what we see in the evidence that we have currently, that we see a universe that pops into existence from a nothing point. So I don't know where your objection. I would think that you would agree with me on that. That yeah, this brings up some very philosophical discussions we need to have, and we need to see if they provide a basis for how we're looking at science too. Is the universe orderly? Well, if it's not, then why do we depend on laws of logic? Why do we depend on the rapidity of nature and those laws that come into play? And why did and then let's go beyond that. Let's go and look at Genesis and how Genesis is set up. And this is where me and Caleb we're having some disagreement earlier, so we don't even have all the answers here. But I see Genesis as a historical narrative. I don't see it as a just some allegory or anything like that. But I'm also not a young Earth creationist. I don't believe it happened over 6,000 years. I don't think that the sun came before the light. You know, I don't think all that. I'm not a young Earth creationist. I think young Earth is probably could be an invalid mytho type of response. And I know some of my young Earth friends probably yell at me for that later, but that's fine. I'm an old Earth creationist. I think that God created over a long period of time. And I think Genesis, in its initial conditions, it gets a 10 out of 10 score, where you have all these other cultures that end up not getting any of them, or the Enuma Elish, which ends up getting a 2 out of 10. So the initial conditions, by way of, I think Genesis, I think Genesis, yeah, I think Genesis gets the days of creation correct. I think they get day one, you get God, and then you get a change in perspective in 1 verse 2, and then you get the creation of light, which is, I think, God in the beginning. God's created the heavens and earth. I think that's all. Uh, um, um, I think that's all of space, time, and reality, right? Which may have taken something like 10 billion years. I'm not 100% sure, but I think Earth is 4.6 billion years old. So I would say that day 2 was it this? I'm messing up my days here, but then you get the light, right? And I think that's where you get that change of perspective, because now God's over the water. It's a perspective change. Galileo once said, if you're interpreting the Bible, the worst thing you can do is get the wrong perspective, right? So I think that, like, if you get the right perspective of now we see God looking outside of creation, then goes in and looks outward towards creation, that's where you get that perspective change, which I see is actual congruent with how they wrote back then, in the ancient Near East. You also get two creation accounts in many of those ancient Near Eastern stories, which it's to me makes it more historically correct as well. Then you see the light, which means now the atmosphere is starting to clear. And there's other places in scripture where you'll see in like Job where, thick darkness just covered the earth. And then scientifically, we know that earth was covered in a thick atmosphere. It was actually something like 9 times thicker than that of Venus. And light can only penetrate, you only get like ultraviolet light that comes from Venus, So I mean, and I think in part of it you get like a red light phenomena there as well. But our atmosphere is actually completely covered in darkness, and as our atmosphere cleared, then you got the light that comes through. Then now next thing you know, we're coming into oxygenation events where on I think it was day, let me see, yeah, the dry land emerges and plants come about, right? So we get that the oxygenation event and plate tectonics come into play, and then we get dry land appearing and stuff like that. And you see that and it's wild. You see it in science that we were a water planet at one time, and through oxygenation and plate tectonics we were able to get land masses, right? Starts out with those three little ones you see in the science textbooks, like little volcanic islands and stuff. And then as plate tectonics comes about, it emerges. So I think Genesis gets it right. And I don't really see a problem. And, there's some people that would disagree with me that Genesis is more like a functional view. It's more allegory and stuff like that. And I respect their position. I just disagree with it. So I wouldn't hold that Genesis is a myth. Now, the last part, why are they more valid than other stories, is because I think as soon as you introduce a pre-existent matter, you've now gone out of the realm of the Big Bang and of what we know in modern science, or what we theorize in modern science. And I think that's a big problem for those other creation myths. But go ahead. I've talked enough now.
I don't even know where to start. Okay, let me start like this. Okay, what I can say basically is that it's more like it's a hypothesis. It's like a theory, because all these people, the Asian people who are writing these books and everything, uh, they're, they're not really well versed in, let's say, astronomy, geography, physics. I feel these people are just trying to interpret how we came into existence. They're just giving us a theory of how we came into existence, because the major problem that still comes in is that God's existence still cannot be proven. That's why I have a problem, because if you can't prove God's existence, then how is this all coming about eventually? I know also we can go back to the argument of causation. Yes, everything that starts has to have a creator. That's true. But as I said again, that argument really doesn't rule out polytheism, because what if it was a combination of gods who made this world? We really don't know. So, and then also the argument of causation still doesn't specify the Christian God as the uncaused creator. That's where the problem is. No one can say that with irrefutable evidence that the Christian God is the uncaused creator. Then, as I said, these are hypotheses. So they can also be subject to plagiarism, also misinterpretations, because remember, there are also creation myths that came before Genesis with the Babylonians, the Sumerians. We've also got the Egyptians. So there might be some forms of plagiarism in there, because most of their creation stories there are similarities, especially if we talk about the primordial waters, because the ancients just thought that, okay, whenever you see a big landmass of water, a big body of water, the vastness of it just spooks you away. So we see a lot of similarities in all of these creation stories. Okay, so now this can also be subject to plagiarism, and also misinterpretations. Okay? So that's where I'm having the big problems are, because we can agree, yes, argument of causation, yes, and everything. But then when it says, okay, now let's try to zone in on who is really responsible for this, we enter into a world of now so many possibilities. Because we've got so many creation myths. We've got the Earth Diver, is it the twins, ex nihilo? We've also got the Big Bang. You see, so
Yeah. So what do you think about? Okay. So what do you think about the Big Bang? I mean, you're more scientifically minded. What do you think about? I mean, that to me would rule out anything that talks about matter pre-existing, because it's like saying nature gives birth to nature, right? I mean, that can't happen. Or it's like, just give it some time and I'll give birth to my mother, right? So I mean, it's just not going to happen, right? So
when it comes to
there was
the
a time where there was nothing, and then we had something come in, and that's where matter comes from. But in these creation myths, even the Egyptians, you have pre-existing matter. You have the waters, okay?
yeah,
And
primordial.
yes, these primordial waters, but that's saying that matter's pre-existent. If you, as being a person that takes into consideration science, just like I do, I would have to discount those myths because they don't provide the explanatory power to enforce my hypothesis, right? They
Oh,
wouldn't.
just let me, sorry to
Yeah.
cut short. The Big Bang, I've read it and everything. I'm not really a Big Bang supporter like that. My stance basically is nobody really knows and everything. No one was there and everything. So we can just theorize, and then we can look at the best theories. So when it comes to me, I would just say what we can't answer, we just leave it that way.
Just leave it blank. Well, that's not science, dude.
Okay, no,
It's
but
not science. We got
the
to
thing,
discover. We got to continue to discover.
yes, we
So
can. Okay, I would say okay. I would say I would lean more towards the pantheist. The universe has just been there; it's eternal, and then I would lean more towards that.
you would learn more towards a pantheism,
Where they say the universe. I don't know if I'm getting correct,
an
but
eternal, maybe eternalism. You're talking about that the universe is always been there,
it's always been there. Remember, like I thought, like we can also go to the law of conservation of matter. Matter cannot be created or
created or
destroyed.
destroyed, but that's
Yeah,
within the closed system. So you've got to think now. Now you're stepping out of
the
what we're
close.
talking about here, right? So you know, we're talking within the closed system. Matter cannot be created or destroyed once that whole big bang and stuff happens. So we're looking at within the universe. But what we're talking about is now we're talking about before space and time, and that's what it seems like the evidence that we're seeing from cosmology and astrophysics, that it goes back to what they call a nothing point, a singularity. And there's several singularities, and they're textbook right now, right? The singularity theorems, they're textbook right now. And even if you say, well, we don't know for sure, because I do admit there's that billionth of a second that we have that we don't know. I'm not willing to say the explanatory power is not there to say that it did go all the way back, because I think it is there. I think that we've pretty much come to a point where we're saying, hey, this works. Why? Because no matter what model we use to try to predict things, and what we try to use to tell us where the universe came from, I think that this model is the most correct, because we keep coming back to this point. We keep coming back here. And not only that, but the physical evidence we see with the redshift and the background cosmic radiation noise, right? The CMB, I think. We see that there is a start to inflation. We see that there is something that starts, and if it starts, it can't have an eternal uh, 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 consistency. It had to start in the finite past. So at some point, there was this There was no space, there was no time, there was no matter. Laws of conservation come after that comes into existence. So I do, we're in agreement there. So it's just where we're placing things is a little different, right? I don't think it causes polytheism. I did want to address that because I don't think polytheism is logical when we look at the laws of logic, especially if we're going to define what God is. Okay, if we're going to define gods in totally something that's not familiar to us, then sure, you could make sense out of it. But if we're going to use a standard definition of God and what a God is, that means they're eternal. They have certain attributes that if you have one or if you have more than one, then they contradict, and we can't violate that law of non-contradiction. So, and I think you would agree with that since you're an atheist or an agnostic in some way.
Yeah.
So I think we would definitely agree there that there is a logical problem with polytheism, and maybe you haven't looked too much into that. It's actually a pretty interesting read. Yes, I do think we are positing a hypothesis, but I don't have to prove my hypothesis before I'm giving you my evidence for it. Basically, I'm gathering what is the best explanation here. I don't have to prove my hypothesis before I can start the experiment, right? I just have to posit my hypothesis because I have some sort of inference that this is a good theory, and then I have to start testing it, right? So I think that's an interest. Now, I don't think there's plagiarism, and I think I addressed that a little, and maybe I didn't address it enough. I don't think correlation implies causation, right? So just it's kind of like, okay, so we might use eggs during a holiday, or every culture uses a wreath, right? Every culture, from the Egyptians all the way to people that wouldn't even know who Egyptians are, right? We see a common thing that humans do, and they make these beautiful wreaths and hang them in places. They're decor. I don't think we can say that this guy stole it from that. I think once we start doing that, we're going to end up looking for borrowing and plagiarizing from every angle. Okay, and I think that's a mistake, because I don't think, it's simple to understand that not all correlation implies causation, right? So we got to be careful there. I also see that all the other surrounding cultures, I don't see them starting the way Genesis does. So I don't think there's any borrowing there. Matter of fact, I see more of what they call polemic. I see them saying, no, you guys are saying that this happened, and they're fighting against that idea of eternalism historically. And it's been a fight, and you can see it all throughout Scripture. So I think there's more explanatory power to say these guys are saying, no, this is not what happened. God made this. God did it here. God did it there. But I would also agree with you that this argument right now doesn't get us to Christianity. I think that comes when Jesus comes. So I would agree with you there. But
so
go
just
ahead,
to wrap this up, I was going to just wrap this up as the moderator. So you all both got your points, and just because David's been talking a lot, I'll give Cassiano the last word.
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
his points, and then we can wrap this up and hopefully do this again sometime.
Eesh. All right. Okay, so let me just see. So let's hold on. Okay, yes. So the other point which I just wanted to talk about was that if we also look at the age of Christianity, is just like 2,000 years old. We compare it with the Egyptians came way before the Christians and everything. So that's why I was leaning more on the plagiarism side, because even remember the Greeks had their hands in writing the Bible during the Council of Nicaea and everything. So there might be a lot of misinterpretations by those people who are writing the same Bible. And then again, the author of Genesis, that's where I really want to hit hard. The author of Genesis. We don't even know who the real author of Genesis is, And when we say, okay, we read Genesis, then we ask, how do we verify Genesis 1 verse 1? We reach a dead end there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Caleb, I know you wanted to wrap it up, but
if you want to respond to that, you can. I just wanted to give people
Cassiano, I want to give him the last word as well. Because we've been on here an hour and a half. Sorry you were late, buddy.
Yeah,
We have a
happens,
sequel. It's
bro.
okay.
I would reject the notion that the Greeks wrote the Bible. We have the Septuagint, which was translated by Jewish writers, version of the Bible into Greek. Those were a council of Jews that did that. The eyewitnesses wrote in Greek, and the Gospels were out way before Nicaea. So we do have evidence of that. We have we have several manuscripts that date before the Nicaea. I think something like 500 and some. Caleb, I'm not sure, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. So there are those manuscripts existed well before. Nicaea. I think Alexandria's, which is almost a complete version of the Bible, existed before Nicaea, and we can tell by the families and the structures from different regions of the world that really had no contact with each other, that these guys were writing pretty uniformly, and they had no power structure. So, like, one person wasn't in power; it was separate guys that had no power, had no incentive to be writing about Christianity. I understand where you're coming from, where you want to say there's borrowing involved. Yes, Christianity came later, but you got to remember it's an offshoot of Judaism, which was around a lot longer, and it can be contested that they existed in the same political atmosphere in the same time. Just because you've got something that's dated on a tablet older, we do know that those oral traditions were around even before they even put them on tablets, and that goes with that goes with several other cultures as well. Even before the Sanskrit, I think it was even older. We found some stuff in Sanskrit that's even older than uh, the Egyptian. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting dialogue. I wish we could have started an hour earlier, but I will give you the last word on that. And yeah, and then I got some stuff to go over with the show, and we'll close it up, Caleb. Go ahead.
Well, it was an interesting discussion, a wonderful discussion. I got to hear your views. I understand also where you're coming from. You also got to understand where I'm coming from. It's just that I still don't feel like you really proved to me that Genesis is really like real. Like I feel is we've more been leaning just on the argument of causation and just talk about the macro aspect, but we haven't really honed into the micro aspect of now. Saying now Genesis here. We've now compare and contrast and say, okay, Genesis is more valuable than the Sa people in Central Africa. Genesis is more valuable than the people in Egypt. We still haven't dealt with that. And then also, we'll still keep coming back to this same point, God's existence. We'll still keep on coming back there, because that's where we'll find it now. We'll reach a dead end there, because you wouldn't be able to prove to me that he exists. So for me now to take Genesis minus confirming the main character of Genesis, it's still a problem to me. So we'll discuss this later, maybe in another topic. I enjoyed the conversation. Caleb, thanks for moderating. Yeah, I'll just end on that note.
Thank you.
So yeah. Thanks for coming on again, and you are welcome to come on anytime. Matter of fact, I want to do an open mic, right? So that means I want you to come back on. We can further discuss these things at a different time. I would be also more than willing to go into an after show here and actually do another stream where we can talk more about it soon, if you'd like.
Sure, just
Yeah.
give me the day and time.
Yep, I sure will.
Yeah.
All right,
Around this
and we will.
yes, yeah.
And then I'm going to also ask you in February to keep us in mind, because I'd like you to host a show as well.
Oh.
Be a host, moderator.
Okay,
That's our guest host month, and we let people come in and guest host whatever they want. So
Oh,
they can get
sure.
they can get two debaters on there and just like watch them go at it and moderate. So,
Okay.
but yeah,
Oh,
just keep us in mind on that too.
what's the name of your channel on YouTube? I
It's
forgot the name.
yeah, proselytize or apostatize, and PORA is the short version.
All right, I'll subscribe to it.
All right, brother.
All right.
So we got these out now.
Whoa, nice.
Which I still
Alright.
haven't gotten one of because he won't send them
Yes.
to me.
Guess what? Guess what? Hey, guess what? They all finished today. My wife just
Great.
brought them down, so
And
now
the
I can send
shirts?
them out.
And the shirt.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
We've got.
I've been
that.
asking him for a couple months now, and he keeps saying my wife keeps forgetting to ship them to you.
Yeah, I have one extra one, and she kept forgetting. But now, since I've got an abundance, I got these nice little polos.
Oh, you have polos.
Polo
Whoa.
one. Got a hoodie, and now I got a hoodie.
Wow, hoodies too.
Yeah.
I like the logo. I like the logo.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. I just made. Yeah. I just came out with that probably about like 6 months ago now. But
Oh,
so we
nice.
got the merch in. We've got more stuff in. If you want anything, ask. Email me. I got to get my co-hosts their stuff out and sent. But I got Travis's made too now. So now we've
Thanks.
got an abundance. We can send it out.
What size did you make the shirt for me, or do you have them in
Large.
all sizes?
Large.
Large.
I have
Okay.
large, and I got
Yeah,
Travis's too.
I usually wear mediums, but I'll take a large if you have it. As long as it's not like
We'll do.
extra large, I'll do that. Yeah, I can do a large. I just don't want it like because I've had like extra larges that are like just so baggy, and it's like oh, man. I'll take a shirt and a hat.
All right, sure will. All right, guys.
Take care.